The early 2000s was an epic era for zombie fans. It was the revival of the zombie, the decade of the zombie. We got the 2004 Dawn of the Dead remake, and shortly thereafter in 2006, a game that was very obviously directly inspired by this movie, Dead Rising 1. So, in the spirit of Halloween, I decided to sit down and finally finish Dead Rising 1 for the first time in my entire life. Despite having owned Dead Rising 1 since about 2009, I have always put off playing the game. This is because time restraints really stress me out. I also never finished Majora's Mask. I'd usually just spend my time dicking around the mall doing whatever. Anyhow, I have to say, Dead Rising is one of the best games I've actually ever played. The voice acting's alright.
3 days from now. At noon, it's my ride.
Is your ride reliable?
Absolutely. That's how I plan on getting out of here.
The gameplay is simple, and the survivors you have to escort are really annoying. Yeah, just go on ahead and keep running into each other. There's not like there's a case file I've got to get to in the next 5 minutes. Despite the glaring flaws of the game and at times the oversimplicity, there's something incredibly special about this game. Dead Rising was one of the most incredibly soulful and enjoyable experiences I've ever had in a game in a very long time. This was like the last era of gaming where developers actually poured their hearts and souls into their games, and you can tell. Throughout the 72-hour mode, the experience was incredibly gripping and had me on the edge of my seat. Towards the end of it, it did slow down a little bit, and then overtime mode was also not that great. All the things that made the game engaging are just missing. There's no psychopaths to kill, there's no special bosses, there's no missions, there's no survivors, it's just, you know, you're just kind of hanging out. There's some things you have to collect for Isabella, but it's not a great part of the game. I'll get into it later in the video, but in essence, it makes the game go from this amazing constant dopamine drip that has you on the edge of your seat with all this crazy stuff to do, and then between all of that, you're rewarded with some cutscenes that drop new information on the zombie apocalypse, and they're well acted and interesting to watch. The pacing in the main chunk of the 72-hour mode is very, very good. Then it all kind of grinds to a halt and becomes a collectathon. What the hell? I always try to be as honest and objective as I can about games when I'm reviewing them, and despite the gameplay and pacing flaws at the end of the game is still perfectly short and sweet with an insane amount of replayability. There's a huge amount of variety in this game with the side quests, psychopaths, and survivors to save. And did I forget to mention, there's multiple endings? So you're probably all wondering why this video isn't on the remaster that just came out a month ago. Well, I'll tell you why. They made a lot of unnecessary changes to the game, like making Frank look like a man in his mid-40s rather than early 30s, or removing references to Vietnam from one of the psychopaths having PTSD problems.
You're Viet Cong. I'm right, aren't I? You are nothing but a filthy communist!
There are many other changes as well that just didn't need to be made. Despite the fact the remaster is a remaster, I personally believe the original spirit of the remade media should be preserved. Am I going to eventually play Dead Rising Remastered? Totally. But like I mentioned earlier, I never actually finished the original Dead Rising, and I personally think you should always experience the original game before you play the remaster, so you can actually give a proper take on the remaster. So I went ahead and played the original Steam release, which I'll tell you was a phenomenal experience. You know when you play an older game and you can just tell it's old, you can tell it's dated. I didn't really have that problem with Dead Rising 1. Even the graphics held up fairly well. The character textures look great. But I got kidnapped as Frank, and that gets rid of all of your clothes, and his body literally looks like he's textured as if it's an N64 game. It's hilarious. The contrast is just insane, because when you look at any other character model's face, they're fairly detailed. From an optimization perspective, this makes a lot of sense. If the players are typically going to have wacky outfits on Frank instead of nothing, you should put most of your high-quality textures on what's going to be seen, not what is rarely seen. Especially in this era of consoles when there wasn't very much video RAM going around. Performance-wise, the PC port was also a dream. I was able to play the game at 165 Hz, and it was a joy. There were no hiccups, there was no problems, it was just a good experience. There are even aspects of the original that the remaster cannot live up to. One such example is the zombie count in different areas, and especially in the maintenance tunnel. I was doing some reading, and apparently the remaster has some engine limitations when it comes to that many zombies being shown on screen. So again, more of a reason to play the original. Overall, I was very pleased to go with the 2016 Steam port over the remaster. The 2016 Steam port is just phenomenal. And don't get me wrong, this mid-2000s version of the game has some clunky game design, but otherwise the game felt fairly modern. The age of the game really showed with the aiming and the survivor AI, but seriously, other than that, it felt quite modern. Surprisingly, the story of Dead Rising 1 was actually one of the main driving factors for me to complete the game. I found the story to be very intriguing, addictive, and entertaining, despite how blatantly campy and predictable the story was. Now hold on, don't get me wrong, there are twists, but if you've watched enough movies, you can usually tell what's going to happen. But regardless of this fact, the story and cutscenes were very well done and will have you on the edge of your seat. I was reminded of watching B-list zombie flicks, which is obviously the point, and I couldn't have asked for anything more from Dead Rising 1. I would say the story and the game itself does a great service to the inspiration material Dawn of the Dead. The voice actors were pretty good too. Sometimes they were kinda but like sometimes they had great performances, so mixed feelings about it, but I thought overall the voice actors were great. The gameplay of Dead Rising 1 can be deceivingly simple. When you first start playing the game, you might be deluded into thinking it's a simple game with not too much going on, and to a degree, you'd be right. The leveling and upgrade system leaves you with no choices. You just become progressively stronger with new moves, more health, damage, and movement speed. I rarely used these new moves except for accidentally. You gain these levels by going around and killing zombies, taking crazy photos, saving survivors, and killing psychopaths. Personally, I found the quickest way to level up was saving survivors. The camera is one of the biggest gimmicks I've ever experienced in a game ever. They kind of just slapped Pokemon Snap on top of a zombie survival game, which in theory sounds awesome. And in essence, you get rewarded for taking interesting photos when something cool happens. There's a bunch of different photos you can take. You can take like dramatic photos, scary photos, or action photos. I found a lot of these animations would come out just a little too quickly, so I just stopped taking photos entirely. I didn't really enjoy this mechanic of the game, despite it being interesting that they even added it. To give you guys an example, just to illustrate, there's this one character, you give him a handgun, and then he goes to shoot himself in the head, and before you can even react to take the photo, he's already blown his head off. Most of the photos in this game are like that. It is very hard to even catch the instance when it happens, especially if you're like mid-combat fighting off a bunch of zombies. I'm going to admit here I'm probably really awful at the game, and I'm sure most of you got all of these crazy photos. For me personally, the mechanic fell flat on its face, and I didn't really enjoy it. My girlfriend bought me the strategy guide for Dead Rising 1 a while ago, and I was just flipping through the pages because I was thinking maybe there would be some cool content for the video in here, and that's when I found out your camera can actually die, and you need to go to battery shops to get new camera batteries. Then you've got limited storage for your photos. You can only have like 30 photos and you gotta pick and choose which ones you save. Obviously, they really thought out this mechanic. The camera mechanic would have been a lot more interesting if it had actual weight on the ending of the game. So if you took a lot of different types of photos, you could get a different ending and you get to see a news report with all your photos and all the ratings and rankings of your photos, and even maybe like a national leaderboard of who got the best photos. And, you know, things all along those lines. If they did that, it would have really helped with giving the player a reason to use the camera. The camera simply wasn't essential for the gameplay, and I used it maybe a handful of times. The combat is extremely simple with not too much going for it. The new moves I mentioned that you unlock add a little bit of spice, but I really didn't find the need to use them at all. With that being said, while the combat is extremely simple, it's also extremely fun. Mowing down hordes of zombies with a katana or a chainsaw really doesn't ever get old. I've been doing it for years across games like Left 4 Dead and Dead Rising, and I still find it to be a blast. So despite the combat being extremely simple, it's also extremely enjoyable. Then you've got the item variety in the world, which initially blows your mind, especially if you'd picked up this game in 2008 like I did. Oh my gosh, it was a crazy experience. Being able to just pick up whatever you can find in the world and use it as a weapon, That's great game design. You've got shotguns, you've got pistols, assault rifles, snipers, literally every weapon you could think of, from katanas to baseball bats. Sadly, as you play through the game, you start to realize that it's just one big gimmick. You start to only pick up a certain weapon type using a certain book type to keep that weapon strong. That's more of a fault of my own as a min-maxer in pretty much every game I play. I don't go out of my way to min-max, but if I find a min-max, I'm gonna use it. During this playthrough, I was using Adam's chainsaws. They're very strong, they last forever, and with 3 different books, oh my gosh, it's the best weapon in the game. When you really find your bread and butter like I did, the rest of the items in the world just become fluff rather than fun weapons at your disposal. In my opinion, this is just a symptom of the earlier game design. In Dead Rising 2, this was not a problem. Essentially, you go around and you can combine like any 2 items, and most of the combined items are really strong. Of course, weapon combination wasn't present in Dead Rising 1, so yeah, it kind of sucks, but as long as you don't get obsessed with using one type of weapon like I did, it still has a lot of weapon variety. If you go my route where you min-max, literally the only time you'll ever use another weapon is when, you accidentally let your weapon break, or you got kidnapped and you lost all of your weapons. Those are the only times you'll use another weapon. Also, hold on and just listen to the soundtrack for a second. My favorite part is when you're fighting the convicts. That song is so good. Dead Rising 1 also features the ability to combine different food items in a blender for different buffs. The quick step combo is probably the best combo. It makes you lightning fast. With that being said, I forgot where the blenders were when I was playing, and I just didn't make food combinations. The combinations are typically very strong though, so I recommend you use them. I beat the game without using them, and I didn't have much of a struggle, so maybe you'll find yourself not using them either. Dead Rising 1 also features driving. The driving mechanic doesn't feel really fleshed out, but the vehicles don't handle too horribly, so I don't really know how to feel about them. They're very middle of the road. They're all right. I only really found them useful for racking up zombie kills or saving a bit of time on travel, especially in that one Carlito mission where you have to disarm all of his bombs that he's put underneath of the mall. It's almost a requirement to drive around. There's so many zombies and you don't have enough time, and you have to walk so much. The vehicles definitely come as an afterthought, and they feel like they're just in the game for the sake of being there. There's nothing wrong with that though, because a lot of the game has mechanics like that, like the previously mentioned camera. It's a little spice that makes the game feel more alive and more entertaining. I welcome it. What is a cooler scenario than mowing down hordes and hordes of zombies with a vehicle in a mall? That doesn't even make any sense. It's such a cool idea. When I first played this game as a kid in 2008, I was absolutely enamored with the fact there were even vehicles in it. I wanted to get that dang vehicle and drive it around all over the mall. The only thing that sucks is you can't drive them all around the mall. You're basically stuck to whichever area that the vehicle's from. The one exception is the maintenance tunnel. You can drive vehicles in and out of the maintenance tunnel. Then we've got the 72-hour timer that really lights the fire under your butt. It's not as stressful as, say, Majora's Mask, because it's a timer for when your rescue comes, but it's still really stressful and provides a sense of urgency to the game. Mechanics like this used to really stress me out, but that stress now feeds into the joy of the game for me. I now find it to be quite an enjoyable experience. I know, that sounds a bit strange, and a lot of the gaming community hates these timers, but for me it really fed into the experience and made me feel like I was actually there, like I actually needed to survive for 72 hours and pray I get out in one piece. So during the gameplay, you might have seen case files, and you might have asked yourself, what's a case file? Well, it's basically a mission with a cutscene. The caveat with case files is that they're timed. You need to be on time, or else you essentially lose the game. You can technically keep playing if you fail them, which is awesome, but you're missing out on a ton of the game if you do so. The case files are at times structured so that you can barely have any breathing room, where they're one right after another. Sometimes you get a whole day between them. This design stressed me out at times, especially when I was trying to save survivors. In my opinion, this definitely adds to the intensity of the game, and it had me on the edge of my seat trying to fit in saving survivors before my case file started. Sometimes case files are just a little short cutscene, and sometimes they're a whole mission where you have to fight one of the bosses in the game. I never knew what was gonna go down when I started a case file. Was it gonna be a mission, a cutscene, a boss? Who friggin' knows? Another time-based mechanic I used to hate as a kid is saving the survivors in the game. It can be really stressful trying to decide which survivors to save, and if you even have the time to save them before your next case file starts. The survivor saving mechanic really makes the game more enjoyable for me, and it ups the intensity like crazy. I remember one moment where a case file was literally about to start, and I had 6 survivors with me. They just kept getting caught and attacked by zombies over and over again. I had to decide to sacrifice some of these survivors just to make it to my case file on time. The fact that the game can even put you in a position where you have to make decisions on who you're going to save makes it a very addicting experience. Of course, the veterans will eventually be able to save them all, but when you're new to the game, it's exhilarating. And don't get me started on how many level points you get from saving survivors. If you lose like 4, that is devastating. To be adequately leveled for the game, it's almost a requirement to save as many survivors as you can, and it feels amazing to do so. Saving the survivors can be a huge pain in the butt. They're almost always getting caught on zombies, not properly following you, so you have to always be going, hey, come on, hey, come on. Then they also have mental breakdowns. They'll start crawling and crying on the floor. Some of them require you to hold their hands, give them a shoulder to lean on, or even require you to carry them. If you have too many NPCs, sometimes their pathing gets stuck on each other, and they'll just keep running into each other on the spot. Most of my worries with being able to save a survivor or not really boiled down to, how do I corral these brain-dead NPCs on time? At times, it was a serious struggle and incredibly annoying, but the game genuinely wouldn't be the same without survivors. They breathe a lot of life into the game, and it feels really cool to slowly build up your safe house with various NPCs that you've saved. You even get side quests for characters you've saved, and sometimes there's something going down like a mutiny, and you gotta stop a mutiny. Overall, I found the survivors to be one of the main points I really enjoyed about the game, and that's despite how stupid and buggy they can be. There's not only survivors though, there's also psychopaths who really want to kill everybody, and that's one of my favorite parts of Dead Rising 1. They're just these mini bosses everywhere that are a lot of fun to fight. I don't even know if mini boss is the right term. They're all like almost the same difficulty, but they're definitely different from the main bosses. You don't have to fight them, they're optional. I usually stumbled upon them by accident, but at times Otis will call you and he'll be like, hey man, I seen this guy with a machete walking around the friggin' construction hall, or yeah, you know. And then you gotta go around and you gotta go kill him. Then you get a little cutscene where they're challenging you to a boss fight, then you beat them and you get rewarded with experience, a rare weapon, and often survivors. All these mechanics come together to make for a very cohesive, addictive, and fun experience that has you tense and on the edge of your seat the entire time. The tight timing between everything, and the fact that you actually have to make decisions on what missions you're going to approach, who you're going to save, and who you're going to leave behind, all while you're making sure your mission timers don't run out, makes for a very, very intense dopamine drip of a game. If I'm going to keep it real with you guys, over the years I've lost my sense of joy when playing video games to a degree, and I've started to become numb to a lot of experience in gaming. And this game really brought me back my enjoyment for video games, hence why I'm gushing over it so much, and I've been talking about it for like the past 15 minutes. I just cannot get over how the high quality cutscenes, story, psychopaths, survivors to save, zombies to mow down, and all the related time constraints just come together to create this perfect storm of intensity that left me with the constant dopamine drip, unable to put the game down. Dead Rising 1 is a masterclass game when it comes to bringing that sense of dread and tension to the player, creating a deep meaning in the world and game experience. The game simply tickled my brain and soul in just the right ways because of the type of person I am. I really had a lot of fun with this game. The length of Dead Rising is also perfect, sitting at about 6 hours of playtime. This is especially true due to the replayability of Dead Rising. I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it to the end of time. This weird obsession with developers and players requiring a game to be 200 hours long for the sake of it being 200 hours long needs to die. It is a disgusting industry standard. When developers do this, it leaves you with an incredibly watered down, awful experience that starts to just become a total snooze fest after hour 40. The industry needs more short and sweet, purposeful games. Dead Rising 1 takes a serious turn for the worse towards the end. It was actually crazy how big of a fumble the end of the game was. They had one of the best formulas for an addictive game I've ever played in my entire life, and they completely ruined it. What I'm talking about is in the final day of the 72-hour mode, the special forces come in, and there's no more survivors to save, no more psychopaths to kill, and no more zombies to kill. I know this part of the game is only like a 2-hour window, but it completely destroys the pacing of the game. Of course, it does fit well into the story, I just found this little window to be really, really boring. These Spec Op guys are supposed to be some sort of challenge, but if you have a gun, just shoot them once, they get stun locked, go up with your melee weapon, and kill them. I personally found more often than not, you could just run up to them and kill them with your melee weapon. Then there's the Watchdog helicopter with the machine gun that go around searching for you. You can just take them out in like 1 second with one of the machine guns from the Spec Ops, and even if they do catch you, you can run away within seconds and you don't face any punishment. Both of these enemies, which are supposed to add challenge, are really, really painfully easy to deal with. So after the Spec Ops arrive, basically, you need to go talk to Isabella, and then you gotta go run to the helicopter, and then game's over, essentially. This is where you unlock Overtime mode, an extension of the story mode. You get an extra day. At this point in the game, there's now a mixture of Spec Ops and zombies, whereas prior in that little 2-hour window, it was only Spec Ops. I found the zombies mixed with the Spec Ops could get a little bit challenging, especially when you're on like 1 HP, and you can't find food anywhere, and these Spec Ops can just one-shot you. Yeah, the game does pick up in intensity here, but if you packed yourself a nice little lunch, you got nothing to worry about. And it's just as easy as the rest of the game, honestly. Also, during Overtime mode, you gotta go on a little bit of a collectathon. You gotta get a bunch of items for Isabella. It's pretty boring. There's no survivors, no psychopaths. You're just going around picking up items in various locations, and you're pointed exactly where to go to them. Then you've got to collect 10 queens, which I have to say is really annoying because you have to actually put them in your real inventory space. They don't just go to some hidden pocket. God, this part of the game sucked. It's like they wanted to add more to the game, but they ran out of time. And it really, really shows. Like, I don't even want to talk about this part of the game. It's not good. There are cutscenes at this point of the game, but they're few and far between, making this section feel even more lackluster. Then you've got the final escape, which is linear, but you know, I actually kind of had fun with it, even though it wasn't the greatest ending. And then you have the final boss, which is just like really disappointing. There were more fun psychopaths in the game. Then you have to fight the final boss with your bare hands and nothing else, only using your special skills. This part of the game, oh my gosh, dude, it sucked so much. Everything about Overtime mode just screams half-baked, let's add some more content to the game. If you can hear it in my voice, I'm just like over this part of the game. It dragged out the game for no reason. It barely added any content. Yeah, it was extra content, which is nice, but I don't know, man. It was alright. I could have done without it. And finally, before we close out the video, I wanted to touch on replayability. This game is very replayable. Unless you're like really good at the game and you use the quick step smoothies, you're not going to save all 50 survivors on your first run. On your first run, you won't even hit level 50 most likely. That means there's replayability in terms of hitting level 50 and in terms of trying to save all the survivors or do all the different side quests that you missed. There are also 6 different endings if you want to go experience all those different endings. And after Overtime mode is done, you actually unlock another mode called Infinity mode. In Infinity mode, all the survivors are hostile, there's the psychopaths, everything's trying to kill you, your health is slowly draining, and food is hard to come by. I think food is actually also limited in this, so you need to be very careful with how much damage you take. Personally, I'm satisfied with the main quest, so I don't think I'll be touching this mode for a long time. I'm just not interested in that kind of thing. But that's the wonderful thing about this game. It's got lots of content, and it's highly replayable, even if it's only in a 6-ish hour package. If you really love this game, it is so replayable you could probably squeeze over 40 hours out of it. Personally, I'm satisfied with the mainline quest, and I thought it was really, really good. Dead Rising 1 definitely set itself apart from many other games from its generation when it was released, and it also withstood the test of time and remains to be a great game to this day. I highly recommend you all go pick up and play this game, if not play the remaster. But honestly, I really enjoyed the original, and it's way cheaper, so maybe just do that. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope you have a great Halloween.